10 awesome skills people got from injury and disease. For a great many people who foster ailments because of unanticipated infections or mishaps, life will in general get more troublesome. It doesn't make any difference how serious the condition is, they need to abandon a piece of their previous lives to oblige it. Now and again, however, the specific inverse occurs. Since forever, a couple of individuals have gained remarkable abilities due to their ailments, science actually doesn't exactly see how it functions. Regardless of whether it's an ill-conceived notion to go out and attempt to repeat these cases to improve your lives as it just occurs in uncommon occasions, they give us important understanding into how the human mind truly functions. Number 10. Franco Magnani. Born in 1934, Franco Magnani experienced childhood in a little town in the Tuscany area of Italy called Pontito. In the same way as other spots in Europe around then, it was obliterated by the Nazis in World War II, it actually hasn't recuperated. In the wake of working there as a carpenter, Magnani at last moved to San Francisco in his 30s. Not long after his movement, he was blasted by a strange disease that gave him amazing, dazed mental trips about his old neighborhood. At the point when he recuperated, he found that he had fostered an excellent capacity to draw anything from memory, particularly scenes from his initial life in Pontito. He in the end got so great at it that he's currently known as the memory craftsman, and we're not utilizing memory as a distortion. Magnani created his best compositions while never returning to the town after he moved to San Francisco. They actually look very realistic. Number 9. Derek Amato. Learning an instrument is no simple accomplishment, as any individual who has attempted it just to look cool would advise you. Contingent upon the instrument, it might require months or even a very long time to accomplish capability at it, and surprisingly more opportunity to dominate it. For Derek Amato from Denver, however, all it took was an awful fall. It was around 12 years prior that he unintentionally fell carelessly into the shallow finish of a pool, straightforwardly harming his head. For the vast majority of us, that would mean a couple of days off from work, best case scenario, and a crippling deep-rooted ailment to say the least. Derek Amato, be that as it may, emerged from it with a freshly discovered capacity to play the piano. Clearly, the injury made him see highly contrasting squares in his mind, which he is some way or another ready to convert into piano notes. That is the only kind of notes he can comprehend, as he can't peruse conventional documentations like different artists. Number 8. Ken Walters. Ken Walters was a fruitful, joyfully settled designer in 1986 when his life got ugly. While he was chipping away at a homestead, a forklift truck driven by a 12-year-old unintentionally stuck him to a divider. It caused enormous spinal and inward harm and had him bound to a wheelchair for a very long time. Be that as it may, this isn't the injury we're discussing. As though things weren't sufficiently terrible, he endured a stroke in 2005 and was taken to the clinic. From the outset, he was unable to try and talk appropriately and needed to speak with the emergency clinic staff through notes. While keeping in touch with one of those notes, he understood that he could now doodle, which was especially astounding to him as he had never been acceptable at craftsmanship before the stroke. The stroke in a general sense changed something in his cerebrum, and he before long began making workmanship professionally. Notwithstanding Walters being reached by organizations like IBM, EA, and Java for his work of art, his photos have been highlighted in magazines and workmanship displays all throughout the planet. Number 7. Ursu. Some ailments are uncommon to such an extent that they just influence one individual in the whole world supposedly. Evidently, Ursu is the just one on the planet at any point determined to have procured academic disorder and synesthesia. Both are uncommon conditions all alone, following a mind injury. In 2009, she tumbled down a gorge while chipping away at her family ranch and severely harmed her spinal stringing mind. Because of the seriousness of the mishap, she has no memory of anything before the injury and even experiences difficulty recollecting world occasions like the fall of the Berlin Wall. The injury additionally crushed her capacity to feel feelings, which the specialists inventively called the level effect. On the other hand, she acquired a phenomenal style for craftsmanship and physical science. Her house is presently loaded up with craftsmanship finished with Sharpies, just as sheets loaded with complex numerical equations that the vast majority of us would experience difficulty perusing, not to mention understanding. Number 6. Edward Muybridge. Perhaps the most popular individual on this rundown, Edward Muybridge has numerous achievements that you may have known about. Aside from the spearheading the absolute earliest strategies in photography, he was additionally the primary individual to make a movie. What may not be normal information, notwithstanding, is the manner by which he got those gifts. As indicated by later examination by a therapist at UC Berkeley, it was a result of a physical issue from a genuine stagecoach mishap in 1860. Muybridge went into a state of unconsciousness for a couple of days. At that point he experienced extreme dreams and loss of hearing, taste, and smell for a quarter of a year. Following his recuperation, he moved to England and began his long and distinguished lifetime as a picture taker. Muybridge might be one of the most punctual known instances of somebody with procured academic disorder, a condition where the patient obtains remarkable capacities following an infection or mind injury. Number 5. Jim Carollo. Despite secondary school's earnest attempts, a great many people are terrible at arithmetic. There's only something about numbers and estimations that doesn't work out easily for everybody, and the individuals who are acceptable at it typically wind up having massively effective vocations in particular fields. For Jim Carollo, however, it was just a question of going through an awful cerebrum injury. At 14 years of age, he was associated with an extreme car crash and surprisingly went through certain days in a state of unconsciousness. The injury was not kidding, to the point that the specialists figured he wouldn't make it. In addition to the fact that he survived and completely recuperated inside a couple of months, he likewise fostered an ability for math. He scored an ideal 100 on his next calculation test without examining, which was astounding on the grounds that he had never been especially acceptable at math. The mishap. He turned out to be particularly capable at recalling numbers and would now be able to present anything from telephone numbers, MasterCard numbers, old storage mixes, and the initial 200 digits of pi just from memory. Number 4. Lachlan Connors. Not every person is brought into the world with an ability for music. In any case, Lachlan Connors was so awful at it that he was unable to try and recall nursery rhymes like sparkle, twinkle, little star. He really needed to make a profession in lacrosse, which might be on the grounds that he was a child at that point and didn't realize that there is no genuine vocation in lacrosse. Everything changed after he endured a couple of wounds to his head while playing. What were simply blackouts and probably swollen knocks, the initial not many occasions before long transformed into genuine epileptic seizures and pipe dreams. Because of the seriousness of his condition, his PCP exhorted him against playing any longer. The seizures and mind flights in the end died down, however they were puzzlingly supplanted by something: he never was able to play instruments. We aren't simply discussing the guitar, by the same token. He could now easily play a wide scope of instruments like piano, ukulele, mandolin, harmonica, and bagpipes. Number 3. Pip Taylor. Drawing is something we as a whole love to do, despite the fact that the vast majority of us aren't normally skilled at it. It's one thing to make an assortment of smiley faces when you can't pack in class, yet it's a completely extraordinary thing to be adequate at it to persuade somebody to pay you for it. It's a distinction that Pip Taylor, a moderately aged lady from Liverpool, England, knew very well indeed. She grew up with an energy for drawing, however was so awful at it that even her instructor exhorted her against taking it up as a vocation. At that point she tumbled down a stairwell and broke her head in 2012. She was flabbergasted to find that she could now draw sensible duplicates of nearly anything. The specialists were confused and couldn't actually clarify it. Notwithstanding, they conceded that cerebrum wounds can here and there revamp the mind into creating unprecedented abilities. Number 2. Sabine. Due to progressions in medication in the previous few decades, we underestimate a few sicknesses. What might be reparable with simply a specialist's visit and a couple of drugs today used to be a clear capital punishment at a certain point. Typhoid was one such illness and unleashed ruin on any individual who was adequately unfortunate to contract it before we could discover a remedy for it. Sabine, a 6-year-old in 1910, was left visually impaired and quiet because of the infection. In spite of the fact that she recovered a portion of her discourse capacities before long, her cerebrum quit creating like a typical youngster. At that point, some probably obtuse specialists even considered her an simpleton. All those issues aside, however, the infection additionally left her with a kind of superpower, the capacity to do estimations with absurdly huge numbers like it was nothing. She turned out to be particularly acceptable at squaring any number they tossed at her very quickly. Number 1, Rick Owens. One of the greatest confusions about head wounds is that they should hurt a ton and, in instances of serious harm, you should pass out. Regardless of whether those things do happen frequently, genuine wounds influence everybody in an alternate manner. In 2011, Rick Owens was an expert culinary specialist with an effective profession. At the point when his vehicle was hit by a major apparatus on the expressway, he didn't have a favorable opinion of it as he didn't have any quick manifestations. Inside 7 days, however, he began getting headaches and his discourse started to slur. He was before long determined to have post-concussive conditions and found that he was not, at this point, keen on making food. All things considered, he was presently into unique mathematical craftsmanship,